as we move on to one of the biggest movies, a sequel that has been in the works for a little bit and has finally come out in the midst of this man working on, what is it, a dozen movies a year? Ridley had that
keep
quote
churning
about
them
like,
out.
why would I retire? Is the man who laughs at anyone who's thinking about retirement or a 401k, anything. Ridley Scott is always on the grind. He never stops and now has a follow-up to his 2000. Full
2000.
25 years right here.
Yeah.
But it's 16 years after the events of the first Gladiator. I was able to catch it again on Prime. It's a good movie, bro.
Yeah, I mean, it is an Oscar Best Picture winner, which is
Best
kind of
Picture
surprising
winner.
in retrospect. Yeah.
They should make a sequel with Paul Mescal. 16 years later, after the events, I'll say, even though they tell you straight up everywhere, of the first movie, you follow this, I don't know, country boy, I want to say, who's married off on the wayside, who's just trying to have peace on his own, right? But when you get drafted, you get drafted, and the events of the story begin as the Roman Empire is led by these, I did not realize that was going to be the story, these two bozo twins who have used the army that they have at their disposal to just get bigger and bigger and bigger. But when you get that big, sometimes you're going to piss off the wrong person. Someone who may have ties to the first movie as well, and it brings it into the events of Gladiator II. The most realistic Roman Empire movie of the year, depending on who you ask. I think we may be divided on this because I did not realize how many people have been disappointed by Gladiator 2.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was fun. It's nowhere near the first. I need to say that.
Yeah.
I thought it was fun. It was
Yeah,
goofy.
it was fun. It was a decently fun time at the movies. I'm not here to hate on Gladiator 2.
Tell me what did I get wrong?
Well, I'm here to maybe nitpick about a few things.
Tell me.
All right, so you talked about how great that first Gladiator film is, and like obviously Gladiator 2 knows that well. They are really trying to like copy the formula in a lot of ways, not dissimilar to Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick or many other legacy sequels. We talked about this earlier this year with Twister and then Twisters. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And yeah, I mean, like since The Force Awakens, this has kind of been the strategy. So like, I think sometimes you can't help but compare the ways in which one pales in some ways to the other. And I think part of what it comes down to me is that the actual like battle sequences themselves are not as thrilling to me, partially because they are composed of so much of that like ugly, uncanny CGI that we were talking about when we were talking about Wicked. You know, there's so many fights against CGI animals in this movie, and none of them look quite right. Maybe the rhino's okay, but
a little
like,
bit more passable than the monkeys for sure. The monkeys were atrocious.
Yeah, and it also ends up making the movie feel a little bit more towards the realm of absurd than the first one. Obviously, there's like some stuff that's ridiculous in that first movie too, but nothing quite on the level of filling the Coliseum with water and putting sharks in there.
Sure. I've been seeing a lot of... Is Gladiator a true story?
I mean, like, it's all based on elements of truth, right?
Something.
Like, doesn't Joaquin Phoenix play? Might be getting this wrong. Like Marcus Aurelius, like that's a person.
I guess, but like the take that he's doing is already different. So I guess I didn't mind the sharks as much. But I also can't argue with someone that isn't the goofiest thing in the world. Even in the technical side of it, there was way too much CGI for my liking because I'm already seeing it age right here on this Prime screen.
Right.
There's a battle at the beginning where I do think it's filled with CGI, but I do still think they feel grand. That first attack at the port, it feels like, even with the sharks, they feel powerful. They're bloody. They don't cut corners. They show you full scenes, but then they'll do goofy things where it looks like a little CGI, and then they put CGI water on the lens, and I'm like, why'd you...
Right.
Why
Like we
did you
talked
do
about
that?
this. we talked about this when we talked about Napoleon, but Ridley Scott might be like our foremost auteur of large-scale military conflicts. And when he keeps it to like stuff involving real people, I think the movie is quite thrilling, and that opening sequence does really work.
That's where I'm defending it, because I'm hearing you. You see those dumb sharks, and you're like, what is this? And someone falls down. But then the way he's choreographing the boat to maneuver it to stop and pin them, and Ridley ends up putting a camera on the front of the boat so we can go through it. I'm like, oh, you win me back with moments like this. So I'm trying to defend it more on the aspect of it is badass. And then there's some of that CGI that's going to age it, as opposed to the entire thing being a bad premise to set it up. I think there's just goofy parts to it that he decided he wanted to go all grand for. And this has been a thing he's been doing. You remember The Last Duel? He was doing press for that, and it's one of my favorite inserts. It's when he just tells the guy to F off because he questioned him on a scene. We have been so like on point with what this man has been creating that I guess I just came into Gladiator knowing it was a director of House of Gucci.
Right.
That's the mode that he's in at this point in time, you know?
I mean, the very first thing that I wrote in my notebook is Ridley Scott the high-class Roland Emmerich?
Yeah, sure.
Right? In a way.
In a way, I see where you're going for there. Roland Emmerich doesn't stop with his script for sure. But I see what you mean. It's these big set pieces where he's still, if he's got to do something with CGI, he's going to do it because he's going to get it done. He's almost like a refined Clint Eastwood, where you know he's doing more than one take, but he's not doing a lot. It's why he sets up what do you say now, 20-something cameras all over the place. So technically he's just directing one scene. And then he can just recoup it again, but he's never doing it from different angles. Right. It's efficient. I think it makes for some really good sequences, but at the same time, I get the criticisms people have, but I didn't think they were the worst. Especially because you also see it in the characters. The characters are also just as goofy as the plot. Yeah. We'll start basic. You got some criticisms on my boy? And you know what?
Is Paul Mescal your boy? When did he become your boy?
Gladiator II, baby! I don't get why they're hating on him. I have never cared for this man. And Normal People, I think After Sun is a fine movie. Everyone has cried and loved this man. And now all of a sudden, he gets a glow up and you're going to trash him? I think he feels like a guy who's living on the outskirts independently. And then they dragged him into a movie that's a big blockbuster. And I thought he fit the role.
All right, first of all, After Sun shooters are going to come for you, so be careful with that. Second of all, I don't think Paul Mescal is bad in this movie. I think he's maybe giving like 80% of a good performance. And I don't know if the other 20% is that the script isn't particularly well suited for what he's doing, or that he's just like not putting a lot of spice on the line deliveries. Like he's really playing the whole thing like this really calm, unfazed badass, and it is badass. Like he rises to those moments, but like I don't think he reaches the like, are you not entertained levels of just like showmanship that you'd get from somebody like Russell Crowe. And I think the script is maybe asking for it. And, you know, Ridley Scott has sort of talked a lot about how he's much more focused on like the production, and he kind of lets the actors do their own thing. I wonder if there is like a miscommunication of sorts happening there.
See, I felt that the script was giving those lines to the twins. It was giving it to Denzel. It was giving it to them instead, so he has no other choice. Who are the best parts of this movie. Exactly. So I felt that he was doing what he was supposed to do. I agree that there's a lot more you can expect from him, but I just assumed, like, no, Denzel's going to be the one to give you that. And especially out of the two, the one from Stranger Things, because they're playing twins. I'm blanking on his name, but he
Joseph
was
Quinn.
very good in it. Joseph Quinn, I thought, delivered some really good ones. He does the flip on Are You Not Entertained? And I thought it was amusing. It worked. I liked it.
So then we could talk about another thing that I have some nitpicky issues with, is that how closely this movie is tied in with the first Gladiator movie. And we might have to do some like light Gladiator II spoilers here, because I think I want to talk a little bit about some of the decisions they made with Paul Mescal's character. As you know, you can even see on IMDb, he's got more than one name credit there. But like tying him in so closely with the Russell Crowe character from the first film just like leaves this looming emptiness over the whole thing. Like it kind of feels like they're waiting for Russell Crowe to show up in the last scene or something like that.
How much spoilers? Light spoilers?
Heavy spoilers? We can go all the way if you really want. Like this is your warning to skip ahead in the podcast or mute your headphones for a minute. But
when Russell Crowe came in a pickup truck and ran over all of the Romans, I thought it was ridiculous. Look, we were talking about if seeing the first one and this back to back is a bad thing or a good thing, and I was leaning more on it being a good thing because of those tie-ins. If you don't have those tie-ins, you're watching this going like, oh, yeah, I guess that connects to something. And they do the Top Gun thing. They cut back to Gladiator 1 to show you footage. So when people see him that he's credited, it's because they're cutting back to footage of that, just like Top Gun did. I don't think you maybe need to see the first one, but whether you do or don't, I think it's better that you do. You do have a character that returns in the sister, wife, and something else. But in that, Look, I'm going to agree with you. I disagree on both points. I'm agree with you on both points also right now.
Okay.
This man's got a terrible scream that he does at the beginning that he looked like Tim Robbins when he loses somebody. And then there's a point at the end where he's got to give a speech and he goes, y'all want me to give a speech? I will not give a speech. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
And then 2, there is a scene with a returning character that's in this movie that they both share. And I thought it was the funniest thing. Are you so-and-so? I don't know if so-and-so was here you wouldn't want to talk to.
Right,
it's
like that.
Funny.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do? You get a Jared Leto type of performance in there. It's going to be a joke. It's one of those melodramatic things where you have to play it right here. And it is. It's almost funny. What they're trying to bring back from Gladiator. It is a little goofy. I also enjoyed every aspect of it because it's that storyline that brings in Denzel Washington. Someone who I believe has a much sinister and bigger plan the entire time. I think that man kind of knew a lot more. But getting into his character, he's the flamboyant one. I will say all of this conversation about him being gay, I think I know where that kiss was that they were saying. There's one scene where he does a... And I feel like it was right there on that third one. I think it plays with the character. I don't get why that was cut out. And if it was cut out, it's created more of a fuss it being cut out. But 2, do they not spend like 3 lines just going, hey, you want to go with the girls? The girls aren't for me. Like, I thought those were the most random lines to have in a movie where his character keeps reminding you that he's gay.
Right. We're also talking about like a depiction of Roman society where they're like a little bit more sexually liberal than like our current.
If it's in Rome, you've tasted it.
Yeah, right. But like it's really fun to see Denzel play in those registers.
No, his performance is fantastic in this movie. It is unfair for everybody else who's in this movie.
That's what I was going to say is that like I think Denzel's performance is so good in this movie that it almost might make the movie worse off. I'm rooting for Denzel the whole time.
I'm hearing what you're saying because my rebuttal to that is you cannot have the lead character be at his level because then it becomes too cartoony. There is a point where he's dealing with the twins. And when it's with Joseph, it's all right. But when it's with Fred, they're both trying to do this bit. And I'm like, you see, that can't be the whole movie. So now we're stuck with this debacle where he's got to deal with Mescal acting like Plank sometimes because there's just too much sauce in some of these scenes. One person has to carry it and somebody else has got to be just like that. And sadly, when Denzel is not with the lead cast, those are some of the best scenes in the movie. Dear Lord. Dear Lord. He says this line to someone who owes him money. And I was like, damn. It's crazy because you see him and you're like, oh yeah, he still got it. It's like when you watch a new Spielberg. It's like when you watch a new Tom Hanks and you're like, they're just never going to lose it. There's no one near what these guys are able to bring. But I like this character. I like the reveals of his character. I liked his plan. You see it a little bit on a final sequence in how they have to cut around for a stunt double, I will say. But it still worked.
Yeah, it still largely works, and a lot of that is because he is such a larger than life presence. I mean, just the way he walks in a room yelling like "I smell devil's breath" is like something that's going to become a regular part of my vocabulary now. He's just such an icon, and yeah, maybe it is a little bit unfair asking him to go up against these like fresh faces, but he really steals the movie.
He steals the movie for sure, through and through. I thought he was great. Mm-hmm. And as we've been mentioning with the twins, I do prefer one over the other. Although the other one, come on, the dumb stuff. The younger twin, Fred.
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous where they take this movie in the third act. But it also leads to a great Denzel bit, does it not?
Yeah, it's when Denzel, again, we're
Politics.
Spoilers here, just like fully takes over the Senate. Like that's the thing. It's like I'm like, let's go. I want this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's that. You saw it. It's a 2-hour movie where you got to deal with. There was one point where you don't get Mescal. He's in jail, and they cut back to him after all of this like debating that's happening in the background. Who's gonna get to an army? All this different stuff. And then it cuts to him in jail, and I'm like, oh, that's right, you're in this. Probably not a good thing to say. But yes, he is a completely different tone to the movie. There is a point where he's carrying the bow from the beginning, and I went, BS, he still doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's really goofy, and it's so much goofier in comparison to that first one.
Than expected.
Which I don't know, maybe part of my reaction is a little bit of just like whiplash from that effect. But like I did have a fun time with it. I'm not trying to say like this movie was completely bad. Maybe I felt the length a little bit in the second half, but it has a lot of performers that I really like. Like I like Fred Hechinger in this movie. I like Joseph Quinn in this movie. He was good for the goofiness. Like,
Joseph Quinn was great.
Neither is quite as good as Joaquin Phoenix, but the two of them together like may be close.
They get a little bit.
I don't know. I found stuff to enjoy. Oh right,
come on, what are you doing?
My theater. I completely forgot. I was gonna completely leave it out of the show. My theater had the foam finger even for Gladiator.
That's specifically so that when someone's on their cell phone in the theater, Zach uses that to cover them up.
Yeah, I'd just say, look, buddy, look.
Hey, buddy. Not entertained.
Hey, buddy.
Oh.
No, I'm not entertained.
So that's where the budget went and why they didn't use it for the CGI.
Yeah. Hold on a second. You didn't get the posters either? I have the posters with the MF Doom mask that they didn't even
fire, bro.
Put in the movie. Yeah,
that's cool. See, if the Sharks would have come out of that, you wouldn't be complaining.
Nah, that'd be pretty badass.
Hey, they've got a marketing budget for it. I've told you, you can't watch any sports without a dozen commercials coming on, players being in a bunch of the promos and the such. And I don't know what the full budget was, but for the most part, I think it's tracking to do pretty well alongside Wicked. I think it's a good double release for the both of them. I think it's a fun movie. Because I've seen Napoleon, and that's what I want to ask you, between Napoleon, his most recent, and this, which would you prefer?
That's a great question, because like I had problems with Napoleon, but I don't think I enjoyed anything in Gladiator as much as this lamb chop was brought to me by destiny, or you're just jealous. Or the boats line. I don't know. I'd probably rewatch Gladiator before I'd rewatch Napoleon.
Yeah, I think the performances in this, I think the story is interesting, as wacky as it is the way that they try to connect it. It's still fun. There are some really cool kills in this. The CGI will age a bit, but for the most part, I thought it was a fun trip in the movies. I think I'm probably locking it in at a 3.5.
3.5. All right, I would probably go 3, but you went up to 3.5 on Wicked, so I can go up to 3.5 for Gladiator 2.
5 stars on both. We've been glicked.
And a reminder that you can follow the Intercut Pod Letterboxd account, where not only do we post our reviews of the movies as we cover them, but every week we are posting lists featuring every movie that we discuss during the podcast. So if you want to catch up with something, you heard us mention a movie and didn't exactly get the title, you can always check out the Letterboxd list to catch up with everything we discussed.